the Code to Cash podcast.
Pricing is not a billing problem. Pricing is a code problem. Pricing is a product.
Price point is really the last thing that actually even matters.
You need to have the most atomic unit of your product, not your product.
Hello, this is Code to Cash. Welcome back. This is Dor and Ajit. Today we have Andy from Gated, and we're going to learn all about email and how to protect your email and do good things for the world at the same time. Andy, really curious about understanding a little bit about your journey as a founder and the concept for Gated. You've been an operator in marketing and RevOps before, so I'm curious where the insight started and how you've been able to find traction so far.
Yeah, I mean, this is very different. This is not B2B SaaS.
Yeah.
This is a free tool that gets given to users. We don't believe people should have to pay to keep their own inbox clean, and we're working our tail off to keep it that way. So the monetization model is very different, right? I think of it like Toast or Ramp, who have figured out like unique, or Google, right? Like who have figured out unique pricing models where you can give something away for free and still make money on it. I can go in any direction, like how we're acquiring users, how we're monetizing, like any of the following pieces on it for sure.
Yeah, would love to understand monetization. So as I understand it, a user has to pay a certain, like they can decide how much they want to pay for the consumer or the person who has the gated email address to then decide whether to respond. So that's just like trying to level set. Yeah, I'm curious how you are monetizing. And I'm also curious, when I was reaching out to you, I signed up for Gated. And one of the things that I was having some thoughts over, it says, this application will have all the access to your email. So I'm wondering what sort of objections you get when a user is onboarding and what makes them feel more comfortable about using Gated.
Yeah, let me take it through it all. Yeah. So we never, ever look at the contents of the email. Okay. To be able, the core value prop we have is we take emails from people who do not know you. Right. We move them out of your inbox. And we send them a note saying, hey, you don't know me. There's one more step. Right. Google will not allow us to move that email without technically having the permissions to look at that email. Right. And so we never read the content, the subject line or the contents of the email into our servers. We only look at the metadata. We believe that Google and Microsoft and anyone that builds spam filters is always going to be better at using AI to read that stuff. And frankly, as I talked about at the beginning, that's always going to fail. So I think there is some degree of people that have that apprehension of like, hey, I'm giving it. I think people, you have to at some point trust companies that will do that. And that's my reputation on the line, and people will shoot me if we ever do it. But we're not looking at the contents of the emails. We are understanding deeply your relationship graph. So, and we learn by how you use email, right? So if you send to somebody, we learn at it. Say Dor copies you in to say you're using it and Dor copies you in. Well, you've already trusted him. So you're going to inherit his trust as well, and somebody else that he copied in won't get challenged. And so that maybe explains some of the functionality. When we sign somebody up, we will scan their entire history of sent emails and say, great, if you've ever sent to them, you're good. And by the way, here's domains you've communicated with frequently. You can trust whichever ones you want. So yes, it does require you to have a little bit of trust. I think there's a ton of applications that also have that. We don't take it lightly, and totally. We're finishing SOC 2, as I think you and I discussed. In terms of monetization, we believe that the user should set the price that it costs to reach them. This is something maybe a little bit novel, right? Like LinkedIn, each of you costs the same to reach as the kid that graduated from college this year. And so what happens is you're blown up on LinkedIn. Right. And the kid that graduated from college this year is like, this is the greatest thing ever. But every user set their own price. We default everyone to $2. Right. Minimum donation to reach you. We allow the user to change that. And so we have some very prominent people that have moved it up as they get more and more emails. But, an early on question was like, oh, if this works great, everyone will donate and it'll just be back to the same place. Right. No, you can dial it up. Right. We cap it for people that aren't getting a lot of donations, but that cap starts to be unlocked if you're getting more than like 5 donations in a month. And so we do have people that gets upwards of 20 or 30 donations in a month. but
Right.
I'd say, the average is like 3 to 4. And so the interesting thing then comes in when you get that email, it says, hey, great, here's the minimum to reach door. It costs $2, but we offer other amounts. And so 57% of people donate more than the minimum. And the average donation is roughly 2.5x what the minimum donation is. So we're able to, through a great experience and expose a nonprofit, drive up some pretty interesting donations.
This gets me so freaking excited. I come from an AI background, and so what you're doing is practically like, it's almost like training a data set in a way, because you now, like, I mean, in terms of like the pricing sensitivity, right? Because you now have multiple different profiles that are choosing different sensitivity levers for reaching out to them. And ultimately, you're basically getting this nice histogram of what's the distribution like, what's the sensitivity like across different profiles. I don't know. It's like, I'm thinking about the options.
The behavioral dynamics are fascinating. You could study it for forever.
Crazy. Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, here, we're a little bit of a brute force right now, which is the user sets the price and it's there. But we've had users that have said, so a VC said to me like, hey, I get sold private jet travel all the time. Must be nice to be a VC. It's like, I don't want that. Why can't that cost more? And so in theory, we could start to understand what's that domain selling.
Exactly.
And dynamically price. Exactly. So a great example for me is I get sold offshore dev services every day. And I don't want it. And frankly, they shouldn't be donating to me. They should be donating to our CTO. And so you start to there's a real opportunity, Dor, as you get to it, of like, instead of an SDR sending out an email and getting like ghosted 98% of the time, this is the other fascinating thing. Donations ungated, a donated email are replied to at a 46% average rate. I mean,
That's
we
awesome.
are 25 to 30xing reply rates. So the vision is really like cold outbound should be much more around matching, and respecting people's time. And the other fun dynamic that I see is when people donate to reach me, they deeply respect my time, right? So if I'm like, I'm not interested, they're like, okay, I get it. Whereas other SDRs are like, okay, but when am I going to meet for 15 minutes? And so I'm like, no, you're not going to meet for 15 minutes. And so for me, it's a win-win, and then nonprofits also win.
I'm for one second, I'm putting myself back into the shoes of like a RevOps or a marketing person. Even from a lead gen perspective, this makes sense, right? Even if I have to pay $10 to get your attention, and if I really have conviction about having something that fits you for your persona and will help you, it's a no-brainer for me to spend that $10, because I probably have a list of like 1,000 companies that were relevant for me anyway. And my TAM is generally, SaaS TAMs are not that big.
Bingo. Yeah, I've had some really top. So early on, salespeople's initial reaction to gated is this sucks.
Yeah.
I now have to pay. An email used to be free. Yeah. But I think the people that try it out a couple times and start to be like, wait a second, the reply rates are insanely high. And so they go from, I wish gated never existed, to I wish everybody could get gated. And we are truly better. Now, I've had some really top salespeople send like 10,000 emails a week, line up and say, well, like, will this pencil at scale? And it still does. And it's effectively like, you don't have to go hire a lot of button pushers to send a lot of emails. Right. So my view is, instead of sending 100 emails and getting 2 replies, send 10 and get 5, and everybody's better off. But I think the key thing is, if your email's not that relevant and not that personalized, you probably shouldn't pay them money anyway, right?
Right. Totally.
Yeah, I'm even, we discussed a little bit of the privacy aspects at the beginning, but I think what gets me a little bit excited here is, potentially I see a case, maybe it's just me, I'm belong with a certain segment of users, where I would proactively would want to opt into a program where I'm like, okay, I'm actually happy and gated to give you access to my content, because maybe you could go in and say, okay, based on some elements inside the content, you can start even doing more advanced options, such as, this emails looks templatized, so, bump up maybe the price, or do like really cool stuff around that, area. Like, feels to me like I would I would consider opting in for that just because that will improve my experience as a user. I don't know, like maybe
I
it's
think
crazy.
that's interesting. We have not offered that, but we've talked about it. I think we're very conscious, like Google does not allow other spam filters on its platform, right? Like when I first turned this on, Google's like, no, you're spam filter. I'm like, no, let me explain to you. Like, we never look at the contents of the email. We are effectively the filters that somebody else would build. And then they were like, fine. And so I think we've been very cautious of, looking at contents of email feels like something that we will never be as good as other people at. I'm sure there are tools we can plug it in. And frankly, it's like, it's a step too far. I guess I truly deep down believe I can do a better job than spam filters, never looking at the contents, right? Like I think if Ajit says, hey, I know somebody, you're fine taking that email, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. So how are you making money today? I want to look at one more thing. Like you sent us the pricing page, and it's the most interesting pricing page ever, right? It's like low, medium, high, it's 0 all the way. So it charges, you're not charging anything for users to use it. I'm curious. And on the other side, actually you're doing good by funding charities. So how does Gated continue to grow in itself?
At its simplest form, we take 30% of the donation.
Okay.
We believe that you as the user shouldn't have to pay to clean up other people's mess. And that is the vision that we have. It's like when we get down to it in the end and we look at our pricing model, will we have to charge like $3 or $4 a month? I don't know, but I think we deeply we believe that everybody has this problem, but not everyone's willing to pay to fix it. And we don't believe people should have to pay, right? Like if somebody sends you shit, you shouldn't have to pay. So there's plenty of people that go out and spend $30 on Superhuman, right? And their motto is, we're the fastest email tool there. And we kind of say like, listen, like they help you manage the mess faster than anybody. We stop the mess from ever happening in the first place. And so what we're really working hard to do is keep this free and give it to everybody. I'd say for as we acquire more people and grow faster, like the model does pencil. We just have to figure out we're crossing a chasm, right? Like Calendly was different. It was weird. People were like, why are you sending me a Calendly?
Right.
And then people are like, oh, I get it. Like it's easier for both of us. And so we're a little bit.
Now it's like, why are you not sending me a Calendly? Why are we trying to?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we're crossing, they for 2 or 3 years struggled. Like so I know them deeply because I actually ran a company that outsourced virtual assistants for 3 years, and we would schedule for people. And so I saw Calendly right at that time when they were going through that, like, this is new. And, I know that the CEO like maxed out his credit cards and the whole story, and it took them a long time to cross the chasm. We're going through that. And so like sharing our story right here and the fact that it's free and getting as many people sign up is like huge. Like, we are inherently viral with your unknown network. We're not very viral with the people and that's what we're working on to unlock right now.
Makes sense. I'm curious, Andy, when you started, like there must have been a lot of infrastructure you had to build to make the monetization work, because first you have to send somebody to pay, and then you have to connect them back and say, okay, there's a lot of attribution involved. Like I pay money, then it has to be sent to a second party. It has to hit your billing system. Gated has to make some money, and then the user has to know that the money came and that they responded for you to track open rates and things like that. How much infrastructure did you have to build when you got started?
So V1, I built it on
Awesome.
that didn't obviously scale. V2, I built it on top of Airtable. And so I had 25 users running with Airtable and Zapier. And again, I had to have them off into Zapier. But it worked. And then I maxed out Airtable. And so then I hired a very smart 16-year-old to build the next version. And so I was able to get up to 100 users, the Google limit, with basically very low tech. And then we had to, and I was distributing money to nonprofits with my own credit card and all of those things. Since then, we've automated the whole deal. And it's highly scalable platform, deals with a lot of the idiosyncrasies of the Google API, which are incredibly tough, which we learned a lot about. We learned a lot about the distributing and the legalities around collecting donations. And so we are now like fully legal. And so there's a lot of complexity to what we do. I think some of the decisions we made were based upon my experience, right? So at Upwork, we allowed people to pay for services. There was a lot of money laundering when you can pay somebody, right? Like
Yep.
I'm going to pay a mythical person in Colombia to do my outsourced project, and all of a sudden I've sent the money out of the US back to there, right? So
Totally.
partially the decision for the nonprofit was driven by how it changes human behavior, but also not allowing people to take the money out of the system eliminates the risk of fraud. And so there are very conscious decisions around some of that stuff as well too.
Makes sense. Yeah, that didn't think about that. There's so many other things when parties change and the money transfers. Interesting. One thing I'm curious about is like there is a personal aspect to email. Like me, I can make a decision on my email and I want to send something to charity. Have you tried also like enterprise-wide adoption for gated? And what other dynamics come into play if you're trying to, let's say, convince an entire organization to move to some like a email vendor like gated?
We haven't yet. And here would be why. We don't fit for all use cases today, right? So if you think about an SDR, right? Like if somebody sends them an unknown email from a new email address, that's going to go down badly. And it's, wait a second, you're selling me and you're asking me to pay. So we've been actively dissuading sales and CS and people that are talking to customers. Now, we could build into the CRM, so the system is smart enough not to do that, but then we've got to build out enterprise level features and all of that. So I think we would much rather focus on individual adoption to start with.
Makes sense.
Then as we start to understand those use cases and we start to build more features, you can go to enterprise level.
Makes sense. What's the top rated charity right now? What do people most often decide to route money to?
Well, that's a good question. I'll pull up the stats and I'll tell you. I would say we will promote different charities depending upon different times. So Doctors Without Borders is a very popular one. You see, I'll do it in a number of donations last 20 days. Doctors Without Borders, Charity Water, ECA, World Central Kitchen, Planned Parenthood, and Alzheimer's Association would be like the top 5. We default those. Well, we're running a partnership with Charity Water, so we default a lot of people in for that. But every month or so, we will change out the default nonprofit, and that one tends to, I think, 50% of people just don't bother to change it. And then on the flip side, let me tell you some of the like random little tiny. We have Everytown for Gun Safety Support Fund. We've got some very, very nuanced, tiny little ones that are getting like one donation a month. So people can pick any one of like 500 nonprofits. Abandoned Angels Cocker Spaniel Rescue is at the bottom of the list, right? So that got one in the last period. So it's like we believe that you should have a right to say where the money for your attention goes. And so we let people pick whatever nonprofit they want.
Yeah, that's super great. There was some news just a few days ago that Amazon was offering something called Smile.
Oh yeah,
they just canceled it. People at my company were a little bummed because they actually want to send money to charity. So I'll definitely mention Gated to them because it was for them it's like doing good while not moving a muscle, right? So that's great.
It's a great parallel. Yeah, we've studied it deeply. We've spent some time talking with the folks at Amazon Smile. It's a bummer. I mean, it's a way for people to passively give to a nonprofit. Gated would be a very similar way, but you also get the email protection.
Yeah. I wonder, thinking out loud when it comes to, the way some early adopters or even, more advanced users are thinking about the pricing sensitivity around, how much they can, ask senders to donate. Are you getting any interesting feature requests or customization requests around that sensitivity?
No, we allow people on their own to go from $2 to $10. If you want to go above 10, you've got to ask us, because what we don't want you to do is be like, hey, it's $100 to reach me for an email. That being said, our next feature will delve deeply into that. So, it won't just always be email delivery. You can roll your own asks and buttons. And so we're spending some really interesting time thinking about that. But I mean, I'd say the vast majority of people keep the $2 default. Like we make that decision for you and then you can override it, but very few people do.
Yeah. And how much did revenue predictability came into play when you were considering those numbers, like the $2 limit and, $20, like, were you running those numbers and, considering how much, user base do you need to get to certain, numbers, or was it not that advanced at a time when you started? I don't know, like, I wonder, because it's like, to me, it's like somewhat of a usage-based type of concept. I wonder, like, how much that came into place.
No, I mean, my first goal is to solve the world's problem and create the right incentives for senders. We're not focused on optimizing revenue yet. I mean, we believe that if millions of people trust us to be their gatekeeper, that is an honored place to be, and we will make a lot of money on it. I would say that we are focused more on broader adoption, and so we're actually keeping the prices down to some degree, right? Like we could bump people up and push them up. And I think the clearing prices, I think, as you talked about, like, I think it's closer to $10 to $15 for an email. We're not focused on that. We're really focused on this needs to work for both sides. And so we're keeping that price down right now. I will tell you what I did consider was the credit card networks and how much it costs to process. And so initially when I used Venmo and there were no fees, 10 cents was great. I think we have a hard floor of $2, and we've done some pretty interesting deals with payment processors to keep that down. And we're probably one of the most innovative micro payments use cases. But, yes, well, we'd love to get a little bit more out of people, but that's not our goal, is to squeeze every dollar out right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in general, because you're basically creating some sort of like a new, it's not a marketplace in the economic sense, but it's like the demand, there is some demand and supply type of dynamics here that it's like gradually being unfolded. So I think some of this is going to happen organically, I guess, like seeing how users are going to adopt. And as you go through the chasm, as you've mentioned, some of these new dynamics will unfold, I suppose.
Yes, I would agree. I think it'd be, if we were trying to optimize for revenue right now, that would be the wrong play, I think.
Makes sense. On specifically to Gated, is there anything else that you'd like to cover from a pricing or monetization standpoint?
I think there's a really interesting article around why we don't price for time. So there's been 3 attempts at this, right? Like there's the pricing micro pennies per send, which then would penalize, like it charges everybody and requires the sender complicity. So that's like one version that's been tried before. I understand that deeply and have studied it, and I understand why people failed there. I think there's we're kind of pricing for attention, which I think is a subtle difference between pricing for time. Einstein said time is relative. And I won't use the analogy that's in my article because it's a little off color. But at a fundamental level, I've had a guy who sells offshore dev services offer $400 to my nonprofit to reach me.
Wow.
I don't want that call, because I'm still going to sit on a call for half an hour and be like, well, can you tell me more about your dev team? And I'm like, I don't need this service, right? So I think the nuance of actually pricing time is a really hard problem. At the same time, I think, in my mind, there's a couple reasons why it has always failed. Disintermediation's one, relativity, value of time. There's 2 or 3 others. So that article really goes deeply into like the problem of pricing time. Now, understanding relationship graphs, what people are selling to you, what buying cycles you're engaging in. Over time, I believe will give us the ability to, for our users, do that thought process for people. So if you think about it, and this is a really smart guy described, he's like, oh crap, there's marketing automation. You're building buyer automation. That's what we're doing.
That's awesome. I think the one thing just sparked for me, like as a consumer of email, or as, let's say, a decision maker, something that could really help me is like, even if there is a salesperson on the other hand, me knowing that this is a person who deals ethically and is an experienced salesperson, brings value to customers. If I can provide feedback on an experience with someone, that would totally, it creates this network dynamic that doesn't exist on email today. So I'm curious if you have any plans to build like any sort of more signaling in addition to, like, not only did they pay, but their history with other gated users is actually, they have a history of a good ethical conduct.
Yes. I think as we get to more scale, we will.
Yeah.
I just shared an article about, I agree with you. Like, I want to, in theory, reply to everybody and be like, hey, I'm not interested. But you know, what ends up happening is you get burned one time, right? You're like, hey, I'm not interested. They're like, okay, cool. But when are we going to meet? And I'm like, no, we're not. And they're like, okay, but like you said no, but you really like, I just, you know, I only need a couple minutes of your time. It just won't stop. Right. So that's why people start ignoring sales reps, not because that. And so like we've started to collaborate with orgs in the sender world. And you see that article of like top sales orgs around what is best practices. And so that's a fun one we've done. At the same time, I think that's more just like, it's hard to force the change. So definitely is like, you know, when we start to get up to a certain volume, we could actually calculate those scores today and we can feed them back in. And so we're starting to think about that ability to do that. We're also thinking about, I'll tease you guys with this one. Unsubscribe is broken. Fundamentally, right? It's a crap experience. So we're working with top senders to reinvent that experience completely. And so we think a lot about where can we find win-win-wins in communication.
What are your thoughts on unsubscribe? I'm curious.
I already, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dor.
Yeah, it felt to me like intuitive to think about unsubscribe as like churn prevention type of concepts, right? Like, you know, because unsubscribe is a very binary action right now. So I wonder if there is like a little bit more gray between, you know, the edges.
Yeah, if you guys want to see it, I mean, I know it's not the best forum, but I can share my screen and show you what we're working on.
This is 100% the best forum.
Okay, here we go. You got to enable screen sharing.
Oh, yes.
In general, when I think about like, you know, relationship graphs, the opportunity here is immense of things that you can do. It's like,
yeah, you get it. Okay. So this is what a typical unsubscribe looks like right here, right? Like unbranded, terrible experience. And I think at a fundamental level, you know, people are like, am I unsubscribed? Have I done it? It's different in every time. And so it's bad experience for recipients. But here's the thing. It's a terrible experience for you're leaving stuff on the table, right? Like you're not learning why people are really opting out. You're making it so hard to opt out. People are marking you as spam. And then you're literally leaving that amazing touch point all by itself and you're not touching it. Right. And so I've worked in all of these systems and I know how hard it is to customize that experience and that flow. So we've built a tool that will help you create a simple unsubscribe page. And I'll show you this video and I think people will get it. So hopefully the audio will come through. But Jordan, shout out to him. He's helped us innovate on it a little bit. So
hi, my name is Jordan Crawford and I run blueprintgtm.com and I'm responsible for the message you received. First off, I am so sorry that this wasn't relevant to you. As a way for me to apologize, I'm going to donate money to a charity if you'll provide feedback on my message. And also you'll have the opportunity to sign up for a service called Gated. It's free and it will prevent people from ever sending you messages that aren't relevant. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And I apologize for intruding on your day.
So
amazing.
To me, I unsubscribe from things all day, every day. I still may buy them. And so people today are writing people off. They're like, fuck them. They're unsubscribed. Like, you know, those people are the unsubscribers. They're not the people that are interested in us. No, that's not true. Like, you know, like do not let that awesome brand opportunity pass you by. So we are powering for people for free, except for the cost of the donation itself, the ability to do that. Right. So you guys probably send out your podcasts on this thing and people unsubscribe, but you don't know why, right? And you're also not leaving them with a great impression of you guys.
Yep, totally. This reminds me, my last company where I was working was a company called Narvar. And
I know well,
So the same similar concept in that people used to get delivery notifications, but it wasn't customized. They didn't know when the package would get there. The brand didn't own the whole experience, which is this concept of the brand owns the whole experience, including the communication with the customer, and not letting like these old technologies get in the way. Like the customers are just going to appreciate them apologizing. Everybody like, you know, sometimes I think like if this person didn't email me 10 times this week, I still wanted to be in touch with them. I just didn't want to be in touch 10 times a week.
I know. I mean, I have bought many times from people that have added me to really bad nurture campaigns and I don't want to be in them. But I'm happy to tell them why, but I'm happy to stay in touch. Right. So I think what becomes really, really interesting here is, okay, so you don't want, and this is also where I've invested and advised some companies around like, you don't want to consume my content on email, but where do you want to engage with me? So there's lots of interesting things. I mean, it's just a classic example of the problem we're solving is so big.
Totally.
And
Totally.
email happened to be the first place we started.
Makes sense. Awesome. Dor, you have any other questions?
I think it was one of the those episodes where my brain just can't stop thinking about all the options. It's
Different
like
possibilities.
yes, it's like it's rethinking email, and there's so many touch points. So
Yeah.
my brain can just it's thrilling, like really.
So we generally like to conclude our podcast with maybe like two things. Like one is advice. You've been working on Gated for the last few years. Any advice that you may have for other founders, specifically as it pertains to monetization or even generally?
I mean, I think you, especially in today's day and age, you want to have a model that is not completely free. I mean, I think the old way used to be like, let me go get a bunch of users and then I'll figure out how to charge for it, right? Like that was the Loom example, the Calendly example, the
right.
Clockwise is another one. And I think there's some insanely successful companies from that. But I think the funding markets are really tough for that right now. So I guess that'd be one. And then, build a product people love. It's the most important thing. Like if people make it through the first 2 or 3 weeks with us, like they never churn because they can't live without it. And so I think that was something we got right really early on.
Makes sense. Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. We loved having you on the show. It was, such a mind-blowing experience. So many different things to think about, especially as it comes to monetization and email. That's like opening up a whole new category. Where can people find more about you? Where can people sign up? Would love to share some things with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn, I tend to publish a lot of articles just around my go-to-market journey. So love doing it. Feel free to join. I will not accept a LinkedIn from somebody who doesn't write something there. If you're trying to sell me something or trying to reach me in any reactive way, just email me, Andy@gated.com, as you did, Ajit, and we connected off of that. So it's great to meet here, and I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate your time.